Welcome to King Street East in Corktown. As usual, this video is designed as an aid to exploration. Log off the computer, pull up this video on your phone, and go for a walk. Each time I'm done talking about a building, I'll throw up a map to get you to the next one. Pause the video and take a stroll. Indeed, feel free to wander off script for a while. I'll still be there when you get to the next site, and there's always another side street to explore. Today's walk really covers two separate but closely interconnected areas of Hamilton: the commercial district stretching east from downtown along King Street East, and the Cork Town neighbourhood to the south. King Street predates Hamilton's grid system, beginning its life as part of a footpath running the length of the Niagara Peninsula, and somehow surviving and transforming into a proper street as the rectangular blocks around it were laid out in the early 19th century. By the mid-19th century, King Street had developed into the principal commercial artery stretching east from the developing town, with small industries occupying the blocks immediately off of King. Most of the industrial buildings have since disappeared, with parking lots and new development taking their place. But the commercial strip on King Street remains remarkably intact to the present day. Our walk today begins at the corner of King and Mary Streets. The empty lot on the east side of Mary Street, just north of King Street, was once home to the Lyric Theatre, one of Hamilton's largest vaudeville theatres. The theatre was built in 1913, and as a publicity stunt, offered a $200 prize for a naming contest for the new theatre. As it happened, no less than 80 people suggested the name Lyric, and the prize was split among them. The theatre would be renovated several times throughout the 20th century, with the original theatre being entirely rebuilt in the 1940s. Nevertheless, after the last movie was played in the building in 1989, there was hope that at least the facade would be incorporated into new development. The structure was demolished in 2010, following a lengthy heritage battle. Walk 2 blocks east on King Street to Ferguson Avenue. The buildings on either side of the street, known today as the International Village, date from the mid-19th and early 20th centuries, and represent an excellent collection of commercial architecture. Pay attention to the details on the upper floors as you walk along. Until the 1980s, a railway line ran down the length of Ferguson Street. The tracks were laid in 1873 as the northern section of the Hamilton and Lake Erie Railway, intended to strengthen Hamilton's position as a regional centre by connecting the city to Haldimand County and a Lake Erie port at Port Dover. This stretch of the line was dominated by light industries serviced by the railway and featured a passenger station at King Street. The merger of most of Hamilton's railways into the Grand Trunk in the 1870s and 80s left the King Street station a little-used stop for local passenger trains, but service came to a dramatic close in 1917 when a train on the railway line hit a streetcar on King Street, causing the train to jump the tracks and plough through the passenger station. The remnants of the building were demolished shortly thereafter. The railway-themed pavilion and plaza on the site today are of recent construction and an inspired tribute to the area's industrial history. Continue east 2 blocks along King Street to the corner of King and Wellington Streets. The apartment building on the southeast corner of the intersection stands on the site of Hamilton's first church, a Methodist congregation established in 1810. The original church was replaced by a simple Gothic structure designed by William Leith in 1868, a building which was itself destroyed in a 1912 fire. Undaunted, the congregation hired William Hunter to design a massive domed church which dominated the intersection. The new church stood until 1969, when it too was destroyed by fire, depriving the city of a much-admired landmark. Walk 2 blocks further east along King Street, to Victoria Avenue. St. Patrick's Roman Catholic Church, on the southeast corner of King and Victoria, was built in 1877 as the spiritual home of the city's Irish community. When built, St. Patrick's was several blocks east of the built-up area of the city, and has seen nearly a century and a half of development in the city. The building was designed by Joseph Connolly, an architect with close ties to the Catholic Church, who had already been responsible for imposing Catholic churches in both Guelph and London. Connolly, an Irishman himself, was trained in the writings of Augustine Pugin, an Englishman who encouraged the close study of Gothic churches, leading to a revival of the style in the early 19th century. St. Patrick's briefly served as Hamilton's Catholic Cathedral between 1927 and 1933. The church's interior is magnificent and well worth stepping into if the doors are open. From St. Patrick's, walk south on Victoria Avenue. Consider walking 2 blocks further east on Main Street to see the imposing former Catholic high school on the southeast corner of Main and Emerald, built in 1928 to plans by the prolific Hamilton architects Hutton and Souter. Otherwise, or when you're finished, continue south on Victoria Avenue to Hunter Street. The block southwest of Hunter and Victoria, now occupied by the on-ramps for the Claremont Access Road, was once entirely occupied by Hamilton's Collegiate Institute. The building was an elaborate Romanesque structure designed by Hamilton architect William Stewart in 1896 and intended to replace a far smaller structure close to downtown, which had become inadequate to the city's booming population. When opened, the building also served to house a training school for teachers. The structure was destroyed in a 1946 fire. Continue south on Victoria Avenue to Stinson Street, and turn right. The area south of King Street is known as Corktown, and was historically associated with the city's Irish community. In the mid-19th century, pushed out of Ireland by poverty, a harsh and unsympathetic government, and especially a devastating famine as the potato crop failed several years in a row, hundreds of thousands of Irish immigrants flooded into Canada. Corktown's history as a community began when a group of these refugees began erecting makeshift dwellings in the poorly drained area southeast of downtown Hamilton. The area was never exclusively Irish, nor, as it developed, did it remain exclusively impoverished, but in the late 19th and early 20th centuries it garnered a reputation as a dangerous and hopeless slum. Accordingly, when the Toronto, Hamilton and Buffalo Railway was built through Hamilton in the mid-1890s, the line cut diagonally through the neighbourhood. The land for the right-of-way was cheap, and the city, far from objecting, saw the construction of the railway as an opportunity to wipe out a neighbourhood which was regarded as an embarrassment. Despite its bisection, Corktown remained a cohesive neighbourhood, and throughout the area there remain to this day extensive pockets of Victorian working-class housing. Turn left at Wellington Street, then right on Yonge Street, passing under the former Toronto, Hamilton and Buffalo main line, and stopping at the corner of Yonge Street and Ferguson Avenue. The Cork Town Pub, on the northwest corner of Yonge and Ferguson, was built in 1888 as the new home of Dade Sullivan's grocery store. In addition to running a successful grocery store, Sullivan was widely regarded as Corktown's unofficial social and political leader for much of his life, and the new grocery store quickly became the community's social centre. The Cork Town Pub is one of the city's oldest such establishments, having been first established in the building in 1931. The large park on the southeast corner of Yonge and Ferguson was once the site of the Toronto, Hamilton and Buffalo Railway's Hamilton Freight Yards. Walk 3 blocks west on Yonge Street to John Street South. The western portions of Corktown were badly affected by the development of high-rise apartments in the mid-20th century. Turn left on John Street and walk a block south to Forest Avenue. The Church of the Ascension was built in 1851 to plans by Frederick Cumberland, one of Toronto's leading architects of the day, best known as the architect of Toronto's Anglican Cathedral, a building which bears a strong family resemblance to the Church of the Ascension. The congregation was always more strongly associated with the wealthy Durham neighbourhood to the west than Corktown to the east. The church has been expanded repeatedly since its construction, and was almost entirely destroyed in a devastating 1887 fire. The building was rebuilt the following year within the existing walls, with the resultant interiors being well worth stepping into if the opportunity presents itself. Walk north 2 blocks on John Street to Augusta Street. This area of Corktown, immediately south of downtown, has always served as a commercial hub, and the intersection of John and Augusta continues to be dominated by 19th century commercial structures. As a final note on the walk, it's worth noting that while the Corktown area was dominated by Irish immigrants for most of its history, other immigrant groups did flood into the area as well, and you're currently standing a block east of the site of Hamilton's first permanent synagogue, erected on Houston Street in 1882 for a Jewish community which had formed in 1856, but occupied a series of temporary spaces for almost 3 decades. The new structure was designed by William Jones Walsh, but has since been demolished. You've come to the end of the walk. From here you could return to the beginning by heading 4 blocks north on John Street to King and 2 blocks east on King Street to Mary. Alternately, you could spend the afternoon wandering east, enjoying the Victorian working-class streets of Corktown.